Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
Okay, here we are then. This is the second edition of the academic seminar of Multiscale U, the Jean Monnet teacher training project, of which I'm a coordinator with Daniela Martinelli at the research center called Citoyen at eCampus University. And this is the second edition because just 1 week ago we had the first in-presence meeting of this seminar in Romania at the Pitești University, where we've been invited to do that. And we are really pleased today, which is the 30th of November, to have Monika Pažur with us as a main guest and speaker for this second meeting of the academic seminar of our project. And I'm going to introduce her very, very soon. Just let me show first the cover of this seminar that reminds you all about the research center and the title of the project, as I already said, but also the framework, the conceptual framework in which this seminar is is located, because we gave this title of Multiscale Citizenship Education for the European education area. This is the conceptual framework of our research and action about citizenship education in both theoretical and practical terms. We experiment a lot with teachers at all school levels all over Europe in the framework of a theory of citizenship education that we call multiscale and critical. It's part of the critical pedagogy tradition on the one hand, but it introduces a new paradigm shift, we can call it, in terms of scales, geographical, mathematical scales applied to institutional, political, and citizenship dimensions. So this is the framework, and as I said before, I'm really pleased to introduce Monika Pažur, and I'm not sure about the right pronunciation of her name and surname, so I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, and you can correct me naturally. So you are assistant professor and you teach at the University of Zagreb at the Faculty of Teacher Education, and you are also the national leader of an Horizon project, which is really, really relevant for us and for what interests also our own research. So I will leave you the floor. You can also share your screen. And I thank you very much, not just for this participation today, but also for your commitment, because you are also the contact person, the referent person for an interinstitutional agreement that we just signed between our universities and faculties in particular. And I really hope that we can cooperate further, even beyond the framework of our own project. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Francesco and Daniela, for inviting me. I'm very happy that I have an opportunity to share some results of the project with you, but also for this before cooperation and future cooperation. Very happy to be part of this, because actually you are combining two topics that are very interesting and relevant for me, both critical pedagogy and citizenship education. So it's really something innovative and very interesting for me. I would just need for you once again to give me an option to share, because I see that now I can't share it anymore. Probably it's in the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, now you can. And
Yes.
I will also turn off my camera, obviously, to leave you the floor, as I said. So you can go.
Thank you. So, as Francesco already said, my name is Monika, and it's pronounced Monika Pažur. Actually, also people in Croatia often pronounce it differently, so it's not a problem if you also say Monika Pažur. I'm somehow used to different last names to be called. I'm working as assistant professor at the Faculty for Teacher Education, University of Zagreb, but actually I have finished pedagogy and also I have PhD in pedagogy. So I'm pretty much dealing with subjects at the Faculty for Teacher Education that are part of chair for pedagogy and didactics. My very close interest is democratization of educational institutions, and based on that, of course, civic and citizenship competence of teachers, students, and probably all citizens of some community. Today, I'm going to present you one little part of the research we have been doing under this Horizon project, but maybe just shortly putting us in the idea from which theoretical angle I'm going to speak about. Of course, we start from two very big concepts, that's democracy and that is education. And as Dewey argued, who is somehow an initial idealist of connecting democracy and education, there is not one without each other. So we can't talk about true education without democracy, and in the other hand, there is no true democracy without education. So this is something that must be connected. But the question that often arises is, okay, but where does and when democracy starts? Is it in preschool, in daycare, in school, or where people are old enough to vote? So this is somehow the question I start from. And somehow, from my research results, in the end, I'm going to try to answer you to my view of this answer. So I said we are going to talk about civic competence. I really much like this idea because when we talk about civic competence, we always say, of course, there is civic knowledge and understanding, there are skills, and there is values and attitudes. But somehow I really like these other elements here as civic commitment, civic self-trust, civic competence. And when we talk about citizenship education, we say yes, students, children, they must develop their civic competence. But in this research, I ask myself, does our teachers and teachers who work in preschool and primary school, do they have civic competence developed? Because they can't actually develop this with their children if they selves do not have civic commitment, if themselves do not have civic self-trust. So this is somehow the theory I come from, and what I argue in that moment, according to Katarina Tomaszewski, there is not a possibility to develop civic competence if the person, it's not only able to learn about his or her rights, but also is able to practice these rights in the places where he lives and where he works. So, true right to education, where civic competence could be developed, is not only when education is accessible and it's adjustable, but it's also where a person can live her or his human rights every day. And that is possible if we talk about teachers only if the person is working in the democratic culture where there are democratic values, democratic beliefs, and democratic relations are fostered. So this is somehow the theory I come from. I say, okay, of course teachers should know how to work on citizenship education, but if they are not responsible active citizens themselves, they can't teach their children that, and they can become active citizens only if they work in the culture, in institution where democracy is nurtured. I have been reading many, and probably uh, you as well, many researches that are based on development of democratic culture, and Rush argues that this is a very long process. And usually the longest step is the first step, and that is that everybody who works in this institution have the same understanding of what democracy is and what are the main concepts of democracy. When they all understand the mission and vision of democratic culture, then you can start working more practically. So today I'm going to present you results coming from the Horizon project called Transforming Education for Democracy through Aesthetic and Embodied Learning, Responsive Pedagogies, and Democracy as Becoming. This is a 3 years lasting project that the coordinator comes from Finland, but 6 European countries are involved. Latvia, Germany, Finland, of course, United Kingdom, then Portugal and Croatia. And we have been working on development pedagogical framework and pedagogical guides that could be used for people to develop democracy by using aesthetic and embodied methods. Maybe an interesting part is that we are working to develop the guides for all levels of education. So from preschool to primary school, secondary school, higher education, and education of adults. So we are using for this all levels of education, and we want to, in the end of the project, develop something that will be useful for teachers and other people working in education all over the Europe. And in some point, I would be very happy if we would cooperate, because when we finish process of developing it, we would need many stakeholders to comment on it, to give their feedback, and it will be very useful to also include you in this feedback. So we have developed framework and guides, and then we had 6 months lasting participatory action research, where we, with our participants, worked with different educational activities based on aesthetic and embodied methods. We did all the time reflection in process, after action. So we did reflect this whole 6 months, but we also used some research methods to follow how our teachers respond to what we are doing with them. As it is normal in action research, in one little part of the research, our research participants also become our co-researchers, so they have planned also their educational activities about democracy. They implemented it in their practice, and they reflect and evaluate the usefulness and how children react to those activities. Altogether, we have like about 50 research participants that we worked with, and they implemented around 30 different educational activities. So indirect participants were about 500 children, students, adults who were part of this project. What I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to now shortly introduce you what have we done, just to explain methodology, to understand better results I'm presenting. We had 4 cases. You can see here that it's case 7, 8, 9, and 10. In this whole Horizon project, 19 cases all over the Europe was conducted, and we in Croatia leaded 4 of them. 2 of them were with preschool and primary school teachers, and 2 of them were on the higher education level. So we worked with teaching staff on the higher education level, postdoctoral students, and students. You can see here that we have these steps of action research, but what I'm going to talk to you about is this data that were gathered via initial testing and final testing. So in between, initial testing was first point when we start with our participants, and in these 6 months, all of this was happening until the final testing. That was the last point of our research. What is important to say that in between we had different learning opportunities. So we have like educational activities with each group, conducted like 5 meetings that lasted for half a day, where we talked about different topics. We have a moment of planning of their interventions in their practice, and all the time we did reflect many things connected to these topics. So, in short, it was education for democracy lasting 6 months. where we used aesthetic and embodied methods like drama, narrative, storytelling to develop democracy competence of our participants. And in one point, they also tried to implement what they have learned and developed in their practice. Uh, we have, of course, followed the process, the reactions of participants when we did this project, but we have followed as well the transformation of participants, transformation uh, regarding how they understand what democracy is and what and how much they understand their role in developing democracy. This transformation was followed via this initial and final testing with 4 methods. And today I'm going to present you results of 3 methods. I'm going to present you this questionnaire where we try to see the level of development of democratic culture of institutions they work with. I'm going to shortly explain you the results of focus groups that we have conducted, but also very interesting instrument we used is concepts in advanced. So in the moment of initial testing, we gathered 10 main concepts that are basics of understanding the democracy, and we asked them to define those concepts, to explain it in their own words, to say what do they think these concepts mean. And we asked them 6 months later in final testing again to define these concepts, and we use this to see how they understand better some concepts. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about
This
today.
is, if I can interrupt you just a few
Yes,
seconds, this is really interesting since the fourth one, which is the first in the table that you showed,
yes.
the group improvisation on can you
Mhm.
will not be part of the presentation? Is there any very short definition that you can give, which
Of course,
really
of course.
interesting because embodiment, it's a really interesting perspective.
It's actually a very interesting method. I didn't use it today because I wanted to show you some results, and this is maybe you need to talk a lot to understand it. But what we have done is that we give them 5 different concepts like democracy, dialogue, learning, and we ask them, like in groups of 4, to create a frozen picture of that element. How do they understand this element as a frozen picture?
Yeah,
And
really interesting. That's really interesting.
yeah, and then we did this also in final testing, and they explained a little bit why the frozen picture looks like that. And it was also very interesting because you can see how they like dialogue. First, frozen pictures were mostly just talking, and then later they try to show in frozen picture in dialogue that something is changing in their mind while they are talking. So it was very interesting to see how they see differently. Maybe some other time would be good to share these photos with you. I didn't.
Yes, and just another question on all these methods. When you talked about these methods, and which are always linked, obviously, to concepts and also to language, which kind of language? So you worked in different countries with using the different mother tongues of different participants, I guess, or is it in English in a
Yes,
third?
thank you for that question. So, important thing I didn't say that every country developed its own research design. And only in Croatia we did these methods to follow transformation of participants, and
Okay.
other countries use their own methods to follow transformation of participants. The only common thing from methodological framework are research questions that are part of the project, but each country could and did develop their own national research questions that were more in line with the background and context of the country. And that is very important because some data I'm going to show you today are completely ununderstandable for like Finland because they have completely different culture of developing democracy. And that was very important that we follow transformation what we thought it is important for our national reality.
you. That's important.
Thank you, yeah, for this question. Can I go now further?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you for questions. So we follow the transformation of participants on two level, and I took this two level from this theoretical introduction I gave to you. So of course it is important this personal level, how much people understand and what do they know and what are their values on democracy. But it is very important in what institutions they work. Are their institutions democratic? And do they have opportunity to be part of processes in these institutions? Because if they do not have this opportunity, then of course they can't practice their personal level if institution doesn't give them the opportunity. So I'm going to these three elements by using the instruments I introduced before, and now show you some data. So we had the instrument that had 20 elements of democratic culture, and we asked them to see and how much this element exists in their institution, and they of course. The Likert scale was used, so they if they see it's very much in their institution, they put 5. If not, they put 1. What you can see here is data of initial testing and final testing, and you can see here changes of what did they say from initial testing and final testing. So you can see that in 6 months participatory research, they started to see some other things they didn't see before in their institutions. So, one question was pupil children are encouraged to have their own opinion or position on each topic. And in the initial testing, there was 377 who agreed with that. But you can see in final testing, this starts to go down. Is a similar with in my educational institution, the development of critical thinking is promoted, or in my educational institution, the context, faith, values from which the individual comes in is taken into account. And on the other side, in my educational institution, the feeling of national belonging is nurtured. You can see that this is going up. Of course, some others could be followed here, and you will see the other 10 on the other slide. But you can see here that they were starting to see that their institutions are not as open as they're taught there are. They were starting to look more critically in what was happening, and it has some many literature on democratic education says that it is important to open the eyes for people to be able to see that something is not present. On the other side, you can see the same thing happening. So you can see here also the statement in my educational institution, students can freely oppose teachers when they have a different opinion. That is very much starting to go lower. And also in my educational institution, everyone's voice is important with making decisions. On the other side, we can see that they see that there is the rising of the statement that one gets the impression that it is best to remain silent about some topic, and also a sense of community prevails. So in my educational institution, as well as when problem arises, we are not looking for the solution, but who is guilty for it. So for me, this was very interesting to see that in these 6 months, and that was mostly they learning through their own reflections, because they talked with each other about how they feel in their institutions, and through their own reflections, I didn't use any research to show them this. So they started to feel differently about how open their institution is. Did you want to say something? It was for me like you put it out your.
Yeah, it was just in the previous slide you showed.
Mhm.
There's also the line about the feeling of national belonging, which is going
Yes,
upside on
yes.
the contrary. And you attribute this in terms of results to your own project and this work in positive terms, or on the contrary, is it for you part of this critical thinking rising in participants to such an extent that they acknowledge that in reality nationalism and the nation-centered perspective on education is prevailing at school? Because in our view, which is a multi-scale one, we are not against any belonging and any institutional or civic framework, but we must be, for historical reasons, very aware about the role that nationalism and national belongings and the national framework of citizenship played in shaping a view which is not multi-scale about citizenship. As of today, still, I would say, it's much more a view which prioritizes a scale, the national one, still. So, and this is another critical point that we want to add to critical pedagogies, because normally critical pedagogies themselves are not aware of this problem.
Exactly. So here I see it that they started to feel that this is bad. So not as a positive element of project, but because many times we discussed that in Croatia, everybody who is different, so that it's very homogenical country, where national, and this is also connected with this when you a sense of community prevails in my educational institution. They see this as you have to think as similar as everybody else, you have to be as similar as everyone else, and your critical opinion is not actually welcomed. And
Okay.
here, the feeling of national belonging and as well community, and I connect it with reflections we had on different activities, is they want us for all to be the same. And community and national belonging means you're going to be polite and you are not going to make any problems, not
Yeah,
in your school or also in your country. This is what it
yeah.
means for them.
Wow. Okay, that's really hugely interesting, in fact. So this is really
That's
consistent
really
with,
interesting. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And
Because
it's also about uniformization and the kind of discourse that, for example, some French philosophers also recently put forward about the difference between sharing something in common or becoming uniformized, becoming the same in a more uniforming way, which is a totally different thing. And this,
exactly, this is the great point. Yes, and that is especially for them seen when they explain community. They see community like especially when they were remembering times where they were in high school. They said in high school they want us all to be community, and community means be as similar as you can to others and don't make any problems. This is what means be part of community, and that is then arises on the national level as well.
which is rather the counter definition of democracy and the democratical approach, I would say. Do
Exactly.
not raise problems. It's the contrary, exactly.
Yes.
So this is,
Maybe just shortly to, because you asked me, I was doing one research on citizenship education previously, where we asked around 100 students that had 16 years at time, who is a good citizen, and then they could choose. So they had like 30 statements, and for each statement they put from 1 to 5. How much do they agree that that this is something that a good citizen does? So 96% of our students agreed that a good citizen is someone who values her country and flag and of his country. So completely nationalist vision. And the 94 of them said that a good citizen is somebody who takes care of his family. And only 42% of them said that a good citizen is person who is uh, being active about bad decisions of his or her government.
Wow.
So they completely do not understand that being part of decisions of what your government is doing is something you take care of your family. They don't understand that at all.
Yeah, this is a really, yes, this is a misunderstanding and also maybe a misconception, which is part of an ideology, one could say, not just in political terms, but in the broader sense of the term ideology. Um, let's say
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
prevailing idea and view of the world
Exactly.
today, which is,
Exactly.
yeah, okay. Now, sorry to interrupt you, but it was really another very interesting topic. So you can move forward if you want. Then we
Yeah, no
will.
problem from interrupting me. I don't see you, so I just hear when you put your mic up. So then I know you want to speak because. But I'm very glad that we discussed something that maybe is not clear enough. So after this democratic culture, we also put an important part for us to see at the level of educational institutions. Do our teacher and preschool teachers, you can see here that it was 53 of them, feel like they belong to their institution? Is their institution respecting diversity and openness to dialogue? We conducted 8 focus groups, and the results I'm going to present you are already result of content analysis I did on this qualitative data, and I'm going to present you just like some summing up of all of that because I didn't want to go too much into details. First, I'm going to show you like some examples of what they said that I think are very, very good because this was said a lot and by many participants. Like about sense of belonging, I really like this statement where one teacher in primary school, she said, yes, I absolutely agree. When we got a new leadership 10 or more years ago, I sent an email where this ship was going. But until today, I have not received an answer. I have the feeling that we are floating on the sea, that we do not know where we are going. The decisions are being made hierarchically, not much of a debate. Of course, she talks about decision making, but I think it's very important that we see here does she feels like she belongs to this school. In one element, she feels like she belongs, but on the other, after 10 years, she doesn't feel like she has uh, any right to be part of decisions. Another one is connected with openness to dialogue, and one also participant said something like that. Usually, when somebody stands up and says it, so she talks about something that is problem, we label it as boring and tiresome, and like when she is going to retire, look how old she is. And actually, we all think that, but we don't want to support her because we are afraid of being redeemed as individuals who support it. So here exactly can what we have discussed in previous slide about community here comes out because you don't want to be different because if you are different and if you're loud, somebody could actually say something bad about you and you're not going to be part of this community anymore. And the last, I think this is like the best the best statement from the whole project, and it was said by one student, and it was said so hard, and she said it with emotions and like maybe even with tears in her eyes, and she really said, I think, a very good point about respecting diversity in Croatian community altogether, but also at the level of higher education. She said, I think that in some professional environment, I think it has come to the point that if we really want to express our opinion honestly, we have to make a big risk every time, especially if the majority of the environment does not agree with that opinion. It is a big social problem. I run the risk of being shunned by others. She explained it so good that they feel that, and really it was said many times in these focus groups and in reflections and in everything we did, that it's a risk to say something that you know it's different from majority, you're really taking the risk. You're going to be somehow like put it out of others.
Yeah,
So you're not going to
you become the scapegoat,
yes,
of the
yes,
group.
yes.
This,
So I sum up these things where so because question is if they have an opportunity to participate to develop their democratic competence. So where do they when do they participate? One category was based on the individual characteristics of participants, and what came out is if you are older, so like 10 years and more working in some institution, and if you are employed permanently. If you are an extrovert, this is something very important that came out, that only extroverts ever feel free to participate, feel safe to participate. And if you are still motivated for your job and still feel that you have responsibility for children, then you will participate. But how? Now the another three categories is how they are going to participate. They are going to participate only in a smaller non-formal group verbally. So they are going to go like in little group of 5 or 6, and they are going to say something about their institution, and they're going to participate only about something that is happening in their class. So they believe that they have autonomy only on the level of class with people who they see that are on the same level or hierarchy. So only with the teachers who work the same thing as they do. So this is when do they participate? They will never participate if they are younger, if they're still not working permanently in institution or they're working not so long in the institution. And introverts, people who are introverts, they said that they never feel safe enough to say anything. And very interesting thing is that we have, of course, parents' councils, students' councils, and teachers' councils. These formally existing elements of democracy at the institutional level will never be used to discuss decision making. So when they all are together formally, they will never discuss about problem. They will discuss it only in the smaller groups of people who they believe have the same opinion as they. And they will never go to speak with principal. They have like spokespeakers, people who principals love, and they will talk to spokespeakers, and then one spokespeaker will go to the principal and say something. And when we ask them about what decisions do you talk about, they speak only about class, sometimes about institution, but they feel that institution is not something they can actually have any that can have any influence on, and about local community they don't feel connected at all. So do they have an opportunity to develop democratic culture? Maybe some of them, who by their individual characteristics feel motivated enough, responsible enough, are extroverts, are working longer in the school, and then they will go to speak about something. But most of them actually feels fear, fear of being part of the process. They are afraid of labeling. They're going to be labeled from each other. They talk about risk. They talk about isolation of those who speak, who participate, and they talk about their feeling of helplessness in being part of decisions on the institutional level. So when we talk that they should come into class and develop citizenship competence to students, and say to students, yes, it's important to be part of the community. You have to be active. You have to be part of local community of your school. We have to have in mind that in Croatia, those are the people who speak that. people who in their own institutions are afraid of being part of anything because they are afraid to be isolated, to be labeled. So I think this is very important that somehow this institutional level is contextualized. And
No,
now
we are really, it's these results deeply strike us because it's exactly the kind of feeling and results, concrete results, also because in some ways, to a very informal extent, just an informal extent, but with many teachers that we met, we also tried to look at these things and convey also some of the meanings that you are conveying us today. And we found the very same results that you are describing. So it's not just about Croatia at all, I would say. It's not just about Italy at all, because we also had, for example, some summer schools with teachers from Greece, from Romania, from Portugal. They came here, and we had also a focus group with 30 people altogether. And Daniela, for example, asked them to narrate, to tell a very short episode of their school life, which they thought it could be representative of their feelings inside school context in terms of participation, exactly, etc. And everybody had such really thrilling and at the same time, I would say, almost tragic episodes that they wanted to narrate, to share with the others, in terms of frustration, in terms of helplessness, as you write in your slide, isolation, risk, labeling, fear. Exactly. So it strikes us that in this more formal context of research and action that you are presenting, these are exactly the kind of results that you found, and that's really also part of the motivation for our own job
exactly,
in this field.
exactly. Exactly, I think it's a very important part, and I think that it's also connected with what you are doing. I will come to that in the end, but maybe at this point that is connected with a very low level of development of this critical thinking on a very basic level, and that is people do not speak. They speak so little about things that are important, and they think that. And then often my students ask me, but what do you think? Because media is now talking about rights of this minority, of that minority. And I said, but democracy is all the time developing. And if we don't discuss about it, if we decide to be quiet, we don't give an opportunity to other people to also change, in be involved in dialogue and change their opinions. Because if we are always quiet and only the people who feel the same say something, we also are responsible that democracy is not further developed. And that is something that I discussed with them on this focus group where these things come out. I asked them, but if you are always quiet, how do you expect for others? And if we say that democracy is developed through dialogue, through exchange of opinions, through hearing others' perspective, how do you expect that the change will be done if only the people who feel the same as others talk? And that is very interesting part of reflections that we had.
Totally agree.
So now I will move to this level of individual, and I will go to these concepts in advanced method, where of course we talked about knowledge and understanding, but you can see in the way, and I will show you that also attitudes about democracy arise from their definitions of 10 concepts. So, of course, again, we talk about 53 class teachers and educators who fulfilled this instrument at the beginning and again in the end. Those were 10 concepts that we asked them that were connected, of course, with elements of democratic education, but as well with elements of our project that we worked on. Not in any moment of these 6 months we explained to them, or we said, social identity is this, and this. We did work with these concepts. We discussed with them, or in reflections, we sometimes said, yes, this is part of empowerment or is part of helplessness, but we never said anything to them or define it to them. So here are some examples, just a little introduction. Helplessness was somehow explained as fear, giving up, insecurity, everything I do has no results, self-doubt. When we ask them about these concepts, we tell them to connect them to democracy and democratic processes, but you will see that they didn't do it because probably they didn't know how. Often they went from their own experience they had when they explained something. Responsibility, they said this was the most common explanation of responsibility, like each individual has the right to express his position, opinion, but in a way that respects the rights and responsibilities for what he said, he has been said, to be aware that your actions have an impact on other people. So very, very basic understanding of responsibility, not at all connected with democracy. And some they didn't understand at all, like power sharing. They say it's hierarchy in decision making and the influence that individuals have in certain positions. So this and many like those have been uh, said. What I have done with those, for each concept, based on theory, I detected 5 main elements of each concept, and then I coded all answers. If none or just one element was mentioned, the code was 0. If 2 or 3 elements were mentioned, the code was 1. And if 4 or 5 elements were mentioned to the concept, the code was 2. So each concept could be valued from 0 to 2. And now you can see in initial measuring that there was 48 people who fulfilled the questionnaire, that we have very, very low level of understanding of concepts, the lowest transformative dialogue, and very surprising to me, acceptance of diversity, because most of them said that diversity is we are all different, and we can't make somebody feel bad because he's different. So very statical understanding what diversity means. Maybe some better were social identity, helplessness, and learning process, since they were most connected with teaching profession. But you can see all together very low level of understanding. So from 0 to 2, most of them had 0 and some of them like 1. So they remembered more than 2 elements. In final testing, we
Did you,
can.
sorry, did you
Mhm.
process your data on your own with your own mind? So you established the 5 distinctive concepts for each
Yes,
of
I mean, I did it on like theory-based level. So I read about each concept and I did a personalization of concepts
yeah,
based on that. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So and it was not it was not automated. It was not just about finding out single words,
Of
keywords.
course not. No, no, no. I read each statement,
Okay.
and I looked if there is a vision of this, if they think about this element in any way. So it
So
was
you
all done.
interpreted the text. So that's really, yeah, it's a great job. And yeah, it strikes us again in this result. Yeah.
Yes, so it was very interesting to see, and you can see that they start to explain it, understand it better. But I really have to say, because if you remember your teacher training, how you did teacher training, and I remember how I do it. I'm also like trainer for human rights, so we have like 5 days training about human rights. This was done 6 months, and we really continuously work with them, and we did many reflections, and they did something practical and they reflect on that, and still they understand the main concepts of democracy on the very low level. And I just want to remember what I said when about this research of Rush. She argued that, and that really is true. We need to people understand the democracy mission and vision similarly to give them opportunity to change their democratic culture, to work with children. And we have the people with who we worked really intensively, 6 months, and we see that they still do not understand well enough some concepts. And I think it's very important for us how we think about teacher training in this field, and that really this idea of having 2 years, 3 years constantly working with people, talking, reflecting, is maybe needed for people to understand the deepness of democracy. However, you can see here that all yellow ones, the statistical change was visible. Only about social justice and learning process, there was no statistical change on the dependent sample from the initial and final testing. So changes were done. They did understand better, but still those are low levels of understanding. What I put now here for you is the green, what is set in green is the element, one of five for each concept, that most participants remembered. So with social identity, most of them connected sense of belonging. With social justice, most of them start from equal conditions. For responsibility, from human rights. Helplessness, they connected with hierarchy. Empowerment, with personal value of a person. Acceptance of diversity, as I said, the main element is there is a difference, we are all different. Transformative dialogue, they connected with change of attitudes. Power sharing, with the vision of responsibilities. Learning process, with acquisition of knowledge. And community, about common values. That was the same in the initial and final testing. So who remembered something initially? This person remembered this, of course, finally, but in the final testing, but sometimes they improve it, or you can see in many times they improve it with some other elements. But what I put now here in red are elements that none of them remembered initially and finally. And I see in these elements two important things of democracy, and that is my responsibility for developing democracy for me and others. So thinking about future generation as part of responsibility, thinking about safe environment as part of social justice, thinking about my interaction with others, that is something that is very connected with creating a social identity. So they don't, and about accepting diversity, the concept of others and me, they didn't understand it. They didn't come to that level. And other level I see that they didn't remember is elements of democracy that are talking about dynamics of democracy, that it's something that is changing all the time, that it's something that needs reflection, that needs behavior change, that needs struggle, that needs being part of the processes. All these dynamic ideas of democracy were completely forgotten. So that leads me to some conclusions from everything I said, but I see it here. There is very poor understanding of the main concepts of democracy, and they see it very linearly. It's like democracy is something that could be developed in some linear steps. They don't understand this, that it's that many things is part of democracy development, and it's not something like yes, today we are democratic one and tomorrow we will be two and in 10 years we will be 10. That it's something that is very, that these concepts are very interconnected, and they can't be seen similarly. We are doing also some linguistic based research methods on these concepts, and we are trying to see if they ever connect some concept with another. Do they understand the relationship between these concepts? And this linearity leads us to individualism. They see democracy as something that should be given to them. They see that somebody should give them an opportunity that they are active, but they don't see this their responsibility in developing democracy, not even on the level of institution and not on the level of the local or national community. So if we say that the idea of democracy is finding some balance between individual identity and collective identity, we can see that they very much start from individual identity and they very much forget their responsibility for others to feel that they live in democracy. And finally, they see democracy as a concept very statically. They see it something that exists and not as something that develops and reflects, and that where discussions are important and where experience is important. So as a conclusion of everything I said, I see that in Croatia, but by people, democracy is seen as something very individualistically seen, my rights, very linear, so no understanding that many things is connected with democracy, and it's something that is seen very statistically. So maybe something you can also think about in your teacher training, what I see as very important is that our teacher training for democracy took very holistic approach, and I believe that aesthetic and embodied methods as drama, storytelling were very good for that because it helped them to connect values about democracy with emotions. And that is something in Croatia, and you will say, what is with you? Emotions are somehow outside of education. And with these aesthetic methods, emotions become part of education for democracy, and that is very important. We also see that it's important to always talk about this taking responsibility in different processes, so as well in democracy, and talk about this democracy that is always becoming, that is always changing. And to go to this first question, when it starts, I just put here some statements. I will read one of those, where when one teacher stated, I have noticed a change in myself in relation to my personal hierarchy with students and parents. I notice that I'm trying to make more responsibility. I often have the attitude that they are like that. It didn't work because they are like that. And now I imagine that there must be something more than that they are like that, and that is my responsibility and not theirs. She says, hierarchy can go in several directions. It is very important that we do the same in our place and start from ourselves. And others here also said that where does democracy start? Is it in preschool? Is it in when we start to vote? And I somehow concluded from everything I heard and many analyses I've done that actually the idea is, as is always argued, that democracy starts in ourselves, and that each of us should find motivation and responsibility to be part of democracy. And somehow I would like to conclude that the actually teacher training is actually the most important we can do for developing democracy, to find this motivation, responsibility in themselves, and give them an opportunity to introduce emotions in education and to grow and to understand that they are part of democracy as well. So this is all from me. I will finish.
We thank you so much for this presentation, because it's not just being interesting in general, but really in a specific way. It can be cross-breeded in a way with many of the things that we also think and do. from different perspectives, in theoretical terms, in practical terms, and also on this realm of motivation of our own research and action, which is so important for us too at the higher education level in reality. And a practical question, did you already have the possibility to share these results inside the Horizon network with all other colleagues from other countries, and so you already know about their own results? Do you think your results are consistent with them?
So we did discuss the results because now we are in the process of doing cross-case analysis. So we present some first analyzation from one to other, and yes, I did share those. And actually, as you said, this idea of fear is something that we found that exists in many countries. Even some of them are on the higher level of democracy development, but fear is actually something that obviously we all have, just on we understand it maybe differently. So actually we are planning to work on this idea of fear and hierarchy in higher education, and something that is comparable within different countries. So
Okay.
some of them also found something similar, yes.
Okay, because the other question that we had, this is a more general one, stemming from your presentation and this great job, the research job that you are doing, and action, as you said, also because it's really a transformative approach at the same time. What is, in your opinion, talking about and coming back to teacher training at the pre-service level, so the responsibility of universities and higher education institutions, what is this responsibility in your opinion, and also the power that we can have at the higher education institutions when we train and educate prospective teachers, future teachers? Do you think it's almost already everything done by previous school levels, right? Because there's this contradiction inside all other school levels, from the pre-primary up to the upper secondary, or anyway, this system can change, and one key point of change can be the higher education in a way.
I will answer on your question on two levels. One is my personal level. I'm actually an activist. I was doing for 10 years in non-governmental organization, Croatian Youth Network. And I decided, and I am pedagogist, so I finished Faculty for Humanities and Social Sciences. But I decided to work on Faculty for Teacher Education as my very core of activism, because I truly believe that future preschool teachers and future teachers who are the first on the level of education, if I change the way they think, the way they see, as you can see it now in my results, we really can go towards change in society. So for me, this is the really very important thing. And the other side is people who come to us, as you said. When I have my students, they really came like in the first year. I have them first year, first semester. They're so afraid of talking. They're already taught that they should not share their think what they think. They are already taught that they could be punished for what they think. So, on one side, they are very afraid, and on the other side, they somehow enjoy that they have no responsibility in their process of learning. Because all responsibility is on me. If I will be a clown, they will remember something. If not, the teacher was bad, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
So I really see from this project what this is some my thoughts at the moment. They will probably change. We should give them an opportunity to talk, even though sometimes this talk is not theoretically related.
Okay.
But we need to somehow encourage them to share their thoughts, because they really learn a lot from each other. And this is what I say, it's connected with critical pedagogy, because it's what Apple said, this knowledge exists in all of us.
Yeah.
We just need to share it. And that's, I often try to remember our students to those elements. Just share, it's here.
Yeah. But this is a perspective which is a good perspective for an activist, like I and Daniela believe we are too. Uh, but do you think also, is there any structural feature at the higher education institutions that should be changed in a way, in order not just to rely on individual
Yes.
uh, good practices?
Exactly.
Yeah,
It should be changed. I think the changes, like from my perspective, should start like from architecture, because you have everything that is done, that it's one people who is in hierarchy who speaks to others. You have
yeah,
no places where people can speak, where people can relax, where people
yeah,
can feel that you want to change. You remember Aristotle, how did the look when you learn something? It was safe. It was comfortable. And then, from what I heard from my students and participants, this idea of always grading,
yeah,
gives them not safe space for learning, because
yeah,
they know that they always have to have the result to show
yeah,
something.
yeah.
So
That
I
this
really, yeah,
this is key for us too. Yeah, yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but
no problem.
yeah, I didn't I couldn't, in fact, I couldn't stop myself, because assessment is such a a key issue in our view, also in our, if you want, more normative kind of research, because our own research for the time being has not been an empirical research looking for results from the situation, but is rather a kind of cooperative development of solutions with teachers and
Exactly.
schools, etc.,
Exactly.
to address exactly those issues that you presented us. And one of the key topics is assessment in reality. It's hugely contradictory, this thing, also at the school levels, for which we are talking about democracy, we're talking about also the ability to cooperate with each other, for example. Then we grade individual students for individual
Exactly.
performances,
Exactly.
also in civic education. It's stupid,
Exactly.
really. Yeah. So,
No, this assessment, and they said, how do I learn? When do I learn safe? I asked them, and they said, I learn safe when I don't have the pressure, when I know I can learn in my own time. And but if you go to the idea of curriculum and having outcomes, the idea of outcome in higher education is exactly that. You have the outcome to show me that you are now at the level that you can pass my exam. Learn in any way you want. I'm here to consult. I'm here. You
yeah,
can work with other people and come to me when you are done. So this is idea of having outcomes. But of course, we don't do that, of course. But I
yeah.
mean, this should be done like that. Please come, let's consult, let's go outside in the community, let's watch something together, let's discuss it.
I think that at the core of this, there's very simply the fact that our own system, the educational systems, the national ones, if you want, but this is true, I think, at the global level for each one of them, are geared much more toward selection and economic and market labor objectives than democracy or citizenship objectives, or nurturing or people's autonomy, for example, and abilities in reality. Even if on our legal frameworks and legal documents we put anything beautiful,
Exactly.
most beautiful things, but in reality, this is why the implicit curriculum concept is such an important concept from critical
Exactly.
pedagogy too. Because
Exactly.
what you said about the ability of the teacher himself or herself to behave as an active citizen as a huge impact on his own educational ability to nurture citizens, This means the implicit curriculum in our own schools is against those very goals of democracy and civic education.
Exactly.
We had also, if I can add, another 2 or 3, I think, observations and questions about the framework, because in the first slides you presented, started from this sort of equation or relationship, mutual relationship between education and democracy, which in a way we totally agree with and we fully understand in what sense. But don't you think that going much deeper into concepts themselves without adding our own values, we should, on the contrary, acknowledge that in fact education can be also, and maybe in a way and to an extent is always also, a kind of violence. We can, if I want to tell you something in a provocative way, education is also inherently violent in a way, because it's always a relationship between a subject and another, or a group of subjects, in which one of the subjects, the adult mainly, thinks he or she has more experience, more knowledge, more abilities, and she knows, or he knows what they need, the pupils and the students. So, and this cannot be really eliminated, even in a critical pedagogical perspective in reality. And we advocate, on the contrary, for a sort of acknowledgement, an awareness, a new awareness about um, uh, this contradiction that is being developed also by Philippe Mérieux, for example, in France, in terms of theoretical thinking. And he talks about conforming rather than emancipating. So these 2 poles of the educational activities, because sometimes in critical pedagogies we risk to forget this conforming side of education, and so we spent a lot of energies and also of experimentations trying to give the best answer possible in critical terms to such a contradiction. And we think also that thinking about the contradiction is the good, a best way maybe to answer, to motivate, to explain why sharing views, as you said, um, not defining things at first, but trying to find out what are the shared definitions already there, and asking questions, putting things into question, and putting forward problems, issues, the basis of a critical pedagogical approach. Exactly, because this means you are conforming people. Yes, you are conforming people, but to what? You are conforming them not to be conformed by anything.
Exactly. So somehow connected with maybe Freire and this oppression. But
Yeah.
what I have in mind now, I really agree with you, and it opened to me one completely other perspective. I mean, of course, I heard it, but now when you started from my connection of democracy education, but if we go in the regio pedagogy in preschool, and if the idea is just to create an environment for children to feel free to develop and engage, then maybe this confronting is very, very little or not even existed. Is that right? Do I understand you correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Even if at the same time in
Because this is also education, right?
yeah. Now, even if in preschool, I totally agree. What I'm saying is not eliminating the need for knowledge,
Yeah, I
or
understand.
acknowledging the differences in terms of knowledge between people, and more expert people than others, etc. So I'm not saying this kind of setting should be in itself the whole of school at all levels. but it should be there at all levels.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
a huge problem, because we in Italy, for example, this is a peculiar thing that we noticed in Italy, and we studied it very deeply. At the secondary level, once you start at lower secondary already, so 11 years old, you lose almost everything of such a setting. And
Exactly.
just also because of some structural aspects of the.
Structural aspects, of course, yes. Because even if I don't want to be like that often, I mean, I have to be. Because structural faculty is like that. I have to give them grades. I have them
Yeah,
150. I mean,
great.
I have to do something with them.
Not just
Uh,
that, but you also have to be an adult which has 10, 11 other colleagues with which you should be able to cooperate. But that's
exactly.
another implicit curriculum message that we
Exactly.
noticed. They are not able to cooperate with each other,
Yeah.
even in the same class, in fact.
I really
In
like what you're saying because this is something that is like personally bothering me sometimes because I know I can't change it, but I'm sometimes like very sad because I have to go from this hierarchically position because you have to do something. And I
Yeah,
sometimes would just like that we have an opportunity to talk, to learn from each other, to engage, to be part of community and to see something that can change. Very interesting. Yes, yes,
yeah.
thank you.
So so we really thank you very much, because this kind of presentation and interaction that we had allowed us, above all, to go deeper into this sensation that we already had at first when we started to cooperate, that we really share very key things and perspectives and approaches and views and values also. We would have, for this reason, many other observations and little questions and little things that we could discuss. Maybe it's too late now. I don't want to exploit too much your time and today, and maybe also because this video is very long already. So we can have other occasions if you want and if you agree. And inside that framework, we would really be happy if we could develop in true terms, not just because of the legal framework itself, this kind of exchange and cooperation. Because what we are convinced about is that even if at the European Union level we still don't have a real education policy, it's just cooperation between national policies, which is already something, but it's not some sort of competence at the European
Mhm.
level. I'm not an advocate for the European exclusive competence in education at all.
Exactly.
I'm for multi-level management of education, but we would be in favor of some sort of European competence too, right, in terms of citizenship education framework. And this is why we're proposing to cooperate transnationally in order to think if we can build a sort of specific offer for in-service teachers for the time being, in order to do the kind of job that you already have done inside your project, and we are trying to do inside our own, put them together, pulling them together, and see if we can already start and kick off a 1 year offer, for example, that we can articulate with different kinds of activities and teaching topics and
Yes.
experiences for teachers who want, on the one hand, to get and be part of this European change, and
Mhm.
at the same level, for sure, they need to spend what they earn in terms of certification at the national level. So we could discuss if there's some solution about the training offer of this type, if you want.
I like
Um,
that very much. Yes, thank you for inviting me and also for these questions and discussion. Is very interesting for me because I really have an opportunity to speak on this level about these topics that I really love and work on. So
yeah,
yes, and maybe we could also discuss, of course, via email. Maybe
okay.
we can
Perfect.
start.
Because in a way, there's also a methodological challenge in that, because in the Horizon project that you are part of, you stressed the fact that you had different methodologies, different
Yes.
approaches for different countries, but there's also the other side of the research that could be developing together some kind of shared and common
Exactly.
strategy.
Exactly.
It could be
Yes.
really interesting. So
Exactly.
thank you
Yeah.
again. I stop here the recording.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.